Alright, what's going on, everyone? Today we are going to go over visual scanning and collision avoidance. How fun is that? So this is CFI task, I think it's task B, pretty sure. Whatever it is, it's important for everyone. All of this information essentially comes from the PHAC, I believe. So yeah, let's get into it. So how do we avoid collisions? How do we sense airplanes? How do we sense the ground? Well, we can't feel an airplane approaching us. We can't really hear an airplane approaching. We can't taste it, and we definitely can't smell it. So that leaves only one sense left, and that is to see it. We have to use our eyes to see traffic and terrain. So let's talk about the eyes. So this is an eyeball, if you haven't figured that out. I tried to draw it as best as I can. But we have a few parts here that we need to identify before we kind of start talking about how everything works. So we have our pupil. Everyone knows the pupil. Then here we have our optic nerve. Okay, so that's our optic nerve in the back of our eyeball. That carries information to the brain. All right, then around the back, the back of our eyeball, starting about right here, all around the outside is a thin layer of tissue. And it's not actually green, but I'm just using green so you can see it. You actually can't even see it that well. But you've probably heard of it before. It's called your retina. So your retina goes around the back of your eyeball. Now, along the retina, you have these cells. There are two types of cells. There are rods, and there are cones. So you have rods and cones all around the back side of your retina. Now, your line of sight is pretty much just straight out of your pupil. Well, if we continue that all the way back to the back of the eye, we have a little area along the retina, so it's actually part of the retina, called the fovea, or fovea. I don't know how to say it. So your fovea is the center of your vision that enhances the I guess the acuity would be the word I'm looking for. Allows you to see more clearly in the middle of your vision compared to the outside, your peripherals, where your normal retina is. It's a little bit more blurry. So going back to our cells, rods versus cones. So what are the characteristics of rods and cones? Well, cones are going to be used more for daylight. So for well-lit color situations. So during the day, when there's a lot of color, there's significant light, your cones are going to work best there. Your rods are the opposite, where they are going to work best in low light scenarios, and they don't really receive light very well. They don't really receive color very well. So, where are these cells kind of distributed along the retina? Well, in the fovea, we are going to have the majority of the cells here are cones. Okay? And then along the retina, the majority of the cells are going to be rods. There are actually about 120 million rods and only about 6 million cones. And the large majority of these cones, of the 6 million cones, are found in the fovea. So there are significantly more rods than cones. So, what does this mean? So in general, what we want to take away from this is that during the day, the best use of our vision is going to be the center of our vision using cones. At night, the best use of our vision is going to be using the rest of our retina, aka our peripheral vision, using rods. Okay? So, one thing that a lot of people don't consider or don't really understand. Sorry, I'm gonna prop my pillow back up here. One thing that a lot of people don't understand is that your vision is actually directly linked to your physical condition. So how you are physically affects how well you can see. And this is specifically highlighted in fatigue and hypoxia. So let's talk about fatigue. So how does fatigue affect your vision? Well, there's really three main ways. Number one, when you are tired, you actually blink less. So your eyes are not getting moisturized and they are becoming drier, which causes blurry vision. So that's one. Number two, the muscles around your eyes can become strained, making it harder for your eyes to see, for the muscles to work. And then lastly, the actual processing of the vision from your retina to the optic nerve to your brain is slower, just because you are so tired that your overall processing power of your brain is lower, so is this. Now let's talk about hypoxia. So this is a big talking point for the FAA, and that is the effect of hypoxia on your vision. Vision heavily relies on sufficient oxygen. For your eyes to process the images from your retina to your optical nerve and into your brain, it requires a large amount of oxygen and a constant supply of oxygen. This is why if you sit here and you breathe in and you hold your breath and you sit there, eventually you're going to start graying out. Your vision's going to start going away because you've cut off that oxygen supply and can no longer process those images. All right. So that is the main effect of hypoxia on vision, because it physically cannot process images, so your vision is degraded. All right, so with hypoxia, the FAA recommends that anytime you are above 10,000 feet to use supplemental oxygen, because above that you could succumb to the effects of hypoxia or experience the effects of hypoxia. However, the FAA recommends that at night you use supplemental oxygen above 5,000 feet. Well, why is that? Well, using what we know, what conclusion could we come to? Well, a lot of people say, well, it has something to do with the atmosphere. There's less oxygen in the air at night, so you kind of need the supplemental. It's not true. They recommend that you use oxygen above 5,000 feet at night because your eyes have to work harder at night to see, because they're not using the fovea, they're using your rods. So your eyes are working harder, so they need more oxygen in order to produce accurate images. If you're flying at 5,000 feet at night, you're not going to pass out from hypoxia. There's the same amount of oxygen in the atmosphere during the day than at night. However, if you're flying at 5,000 feet at night, because your eyes are working harder, you may suffer a degradation of your vision, which is why the FAA recommends you use supplemental oxygen at 5,000 feet at night. All right. So let's talk about the blind spot real quick before we move on from this. So we're going to look at a top-down view of the eyes. This is kind of a bad drawing, but these are your optical nerves. Here's your pupils. So your line of sight is here. And we're looking top down, right? So we're looking like this on someone. Here's their nose and their mouth. Your optical nerves, because they disrupt the retina going all the way around your eye, there's a section of the retina that is not there because it's where your optical nerve attaches. So, because there's no retina, you are not producing images at that spot. So you actually have two blind spots that look something like this. It's where your retina or your optical nerve attaches to your eyeball. However, we don't really notice it because your left eye fills in the picture that your right eye is missing here. Your right eye fills in the picture of your left eye. So they cancel each other out. However, there's multiple pictures you can pull up online where you can, if you close one eye and then back up from the picture, like a little X will disappear. So it is a thing, and it's something to, I guess, keep in the back of your mind, but typically it's not going to affect you day to day. All right, so let's talk about empty field myopia. Make sure I spelled that right. Empty field Myopia, yeah. Okay, so empty field myopia is essentially just if you're flying in very hazy or foggy conditions and you don't have a lot of reference, so you're pretty much just seeing straight haze or straight fog, your eyes are naturally going to focus at a pretty short distance. Okay, so I've been told it's kind of like right past the airplane's nose, but they are not focused at that point to scan for traffic. So whenever you do break out of those conditions, or even if it's not as hazy as it may seem and you can actually kind of see an airplane going, your eyes are not going to be focused to that because they naturally are going to focus at a short distance. Okay, and then next we are going to move into environmental conditions, which is kind of the same thing. It's, fog, dust, haze, ash, no, not ash, smoke. They reduce vision. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Those environmental conditions are what cause the empty field myopia. It restricts vision pretty much. Another factor to think about with this is your typical vision on a normal day uses haze to reference distance. So if on a normal day it's going to get hazy, out past 10 miles or however long it is. So if you're looking at an object that far in the distance, you see it's kind of shadowed by haze. Well, if you have some pretty hazy or foggy conditions to where your visibility is not near as far, and you see an object that's being obscured by some haze, you may think, because of how it typically is, that that object is much further away than it is. But in reality, it's much closer. So it can cause that as well. All right, so now we're going to talk about visual and vestibular illusions. So a really popular acronym that people use for this is ICE flags. All of my markers are dying. Let's do ICE flags. I personally don't like this acronym for two reasons. A, it doesn't split up the difference between visual and vestibular illusions. And B, it actually leaves a couple out, some really important ones. So let's go over those. So I'm going to split them up into two groups. I'm going to go to vestibular and visual. Alright, so the I in ICE flags stands for inversion illusion, which is a vestibular. Before we move on, a vestibular illusion is going to be dealing with your vestibular system, which is your inner ear, which deals with your body's orientation in space. Okay. It's the same thing if you spin around in a chair a lot, many times. The fluid in your ears is moving, is wiggling, which makes you disorientated and dizzy because it is the movement of that is in disagreement with your eyesight. Inversion illusion is when you are climbing and you level off, you have a feeling of tumbling backwards. Okay, so your body's going to feel like you're going like this, when in reality you're straight and level. This is because in the climb, your the fluid in your ears adjusts to the new attitude, I guess we could call it. And then whenever it levels off, it gets it moves that fluid again from what it was just changed to, and now you get the feeling of tumbling backwards. Okay, now we have Coriolis illusion. The Coriolis illusion is similar to the leans, but is when you are in a turn for a while. So if your aircraft is turning and you hold that, and the fluid in your ear settles, and then you turn your head really quick, you'll get a feeling that you are moving or rotating in a different axis. So like if you're turning, you may feel like you're falling backwards, or you're going forwards, or maybe you're yawing. And again, it's just the movement of that fluid in your ear. Okay. Then we have elevator. Here's another vestibular. So this is the vertical movement. So if your airplane gets hit like that, so abrupt vertical movements can cause disorientation, feelings of feelings of climbing and descending, which to me kind of makes sense because you kind of are climbing or descending. So it can be upward or downward, just like brief, abrupt movements. Can make you feel like you are climbing or you're descending. That's an elevator illusion. Next we have our first visual, which is false horizon. So false horizon is an illusion caused by a feature that you are visually seeing that basically just confuses your brain into thinking that it is the horizon. So some common ones are going to be if you are flying towards a highway or an interstate and you have a big long line of lights going out either to the left, to the right, whatever. Well, your brain seeing those lights may want to orient, your brain may want you to orient yourself is that the word orient? Or I don't know, orientate yourself to those lights. So you think that that's the horizon, when in reality, when you do that, you're like this. This could be the same with a cloud layer. So if you have a cloud layer in front of your airplane that's kind of at like this angle, kind of going like that, and you can't see the actual horizon, it's obscured, well, you may want to adjust your airplane to that so that you're on horizon, when then in reality you're in a turn. So that is false horizon. Next we have the leanings, which is when you are in a turn for a long period of time. You're turning, the fluid in your ears settles. So now this is your new normal in the turn. And then whenever you roll out of the turn, your fluid in your ears then moves away from the new normal and makes you feel like you're turning the other way, when in reality you are straight and level. Okay, then we have autokinesis. This is a visual illusion at night when if you are staring at a light, it can seem like it is rapidly moving when in reality it's still. Okay, then we have graveyard spiral. Graveyard spiral is a vestibular illusion in which you are flying and you just are slowly kind of drifting. So at this point, our pilot has lost situational awareness. They don't know what's happening with the airplane. And it slowly starts banking slow enough to where the fluid in your ears doesn't really pick up on the movement. So you slowly start banking, you don't even realize it. Well, all of a sudden, when you bank, what happens if you have no corrections? Well, your vertical lift gets turned into horizontal lift, and all of a sudden you don't have enough vertical lift to counteract the weight, so you start to descend. Okay, the pilot then looks down at their altimeter. They say, oh shoot, I'm descending, I need to pull up to stop the descent, because at this point they think that they are in a level descent, or that doesn't make any sense, a wings level descent. They are descending straight. Okay, when in reality they are banked and descending. So when they try to correct for the descent, they pitch up. Okay, well that pitching up causes an increased angle of attack and more drag, which can actually cause you to descend more. So they continue the descent, so they're like, dang, I need more pitch. So he keeps pitching up, and the spiral gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and you're descending, and then you run to the ground, if you don't stall and spin before that. So that is graveyard spiral. How do you avoid it? Situational awareness, trust your instruments. And then lastly we have somatographic illusion, which is the somatographic illusion is your accelerations. If you accelerate forward, you'll get the feeling of you're climbing, and then if you decelerate, so you're going fast and you decelerate, then you get the feeling of descending. So those are your ice flag illusions. Now let's add on the ones that they missed, which happen to be all visual. So we have runway width, runway slope, or we'll just say runway slope. It's terrain / runway slope, and then featureless terrain. So runway width, what is runway width? Well, when you were landing on a runway, let's see here, what can I use? I'm going to use this E6B here. So when you are landing on a runway, your airplane is coming in, okay? And as you come down into ground effect and you flare, you build up a sense of where the runway needs to be in your peripheral vision right before you're going to touchdown, okay? As you begin your flight training, that's going to be at your home airport. You're going to know exactly where the runway should be, right, in your peripheral vision right before you touch down. So how wide is it going to be? Now, when you start messing with the width of the runway, and say you're flying to another airport, you start doing cross countries, and you fly to an airport that has a much smaller runway than what you're used to. What happens is when you are descending, okay, you're descending and you're waiting for that runway to match that sight picture. However, because it is much smaller, you're never going to get that. You're going to have a different sight picture right before you touch down. So that's going to cause you to come in much lower and flare too late. Now the opposite of that, if you're going from a small runway to a wide runway, you're going to hit your sight picture a lot earlier because the runway's physically bigger. So say at your normal airport, your sight picture that you see right before you touch down is right at the dip in the dashboard, so it's right there, okay? Well, when you're coming in on a much bigger runway, you're going to hit that sight picture on short final or wherever it is, and then your actual sight picture, the runway edges, are going to be like way over here. So you're going to come in a lot higher because you're going to end up seeing that sight picture like right there, and you might be tempted to flare there and could even just stall on the runway. So you're going to come in much higher and you're going to flare too early. Now, terrain / runway slope. So most runways are not perfectly level. They're going to be tilted one way or the other, and you can actually find that information in the chart supplement. So what happens when we start messing with that? Well, on a normal runway, you have your 3-degree glide slope, just like your normal approach, okay? You get used to that. So let's say you tilt the runway up. So you have a down sloping runway. Well, in reality, so at a level runway, we have a 3-degree glide slope. We'll say it's right here. If you tilt that up, you're going to want to follow that. Well, look at that descent angle. That's like a 30-degree descent angle. So you're going to be tempted to keep that same sight picture you typically see and come in way too steep, and you're going to be way too fast. When in reality, you need to be about right here. Okay, this is a very extreme slope. It's going to be pretty minor, but just for visual. So with a down sloping runway, you're going to come in too high. Same thing with the up sloping runway. You're coming in and you're going to want to keep that 3-degree glide slope. So this is your normal glide slope. And you're coming in, you're going to be about right here, which in reality, that's not even a glide slope. You're just flying straight and level till you run into the runway. So you need to come in higher than you want to stay on that glide slope into land. So with an upsloping runway, you're going to come in too low. And then lastly, we have featureless terrain, which is going to be terrain surrounding the runway that causes a lack of depth perception. So this would be water with no wind, so very still water. It could be a fresh blanket of snow. Anything that eliminates features that allow you to gain depth perception on how high you are. This is the same concept, kind of, as the black hole effect at night. Is that you literally can't see anything, so you can't gauge how high you are. Compared to if you're flying over a neighborhood with a bunch of lights, you can see and you can gauge your depth perception off those lights. Okay, so those are our illusions. So now that we've discussed the eyeball, we've discussed vision and sight, we can now start talking about anti-collision concepts. So how are we actually going to avoid collisions? The biggest principle in all this is going to be our see and avoid concept. VFR pilots have a lot of freedom. You can go to the airport, take off without, if you're at an uncontrolled airport, you can go take off without permission. You don't have to get permission for, a flight plan. You don't have to get it approved. You can literally go up, fly VFR, stay in VFR airspace, and do whatever you want. Well, not whatever you want, but you don't have to get prior approval. Okay? With that freedom comes the responsibility of collision avoidance. So it is our responsibility to see and avoid. Right? See and avoid. So this applies to aircraft and terrain. But this concept essentially just states that it is the pilot in command's responsibility and their responsibility only to see and avoid. It is not the student's responsibility. It is not the passenger's responsibility. It is the pilot in command. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't help you. They definitely can, but it is the responsibility of the pilot in command. So how do we properly see and avoid? Well, there's kind of two topics to talk about here. So there's proper scanning and proper clearing. So just marked on my bed. So there's scanning and clearing. Scanning is typically going to be done in flight, to where you are looking for other aircraft, whether it just be a casual scan, or if it's ATC wanting you to look for a specific airplane to have them in sight. Whatever it is, there's a proper technique to it. So what you want to do, if you're sitting and you're flying, you got the yoke, okay? You're looking out and you want to go from left to right, and you want to take it in 10-degree increments. So you have about a 90-degree field of view. It's a little more than that, but we'll call it about 90 degrees. So you want to essentially cut it up into 10 sections, and you want to look and stop and just kind of not like zone out and stare, but look at this point, then look at the next point and stop, look at the next point and stop, look at the next point. And you do that all the way around in 10-degree increments. The reason you do this, because if your eyes are going all over the place and you're looking around, you're not going to actually be able to see anything, because how we pick up on seeing traffic that is further away is through motion. You're not really looking for the aircraft itself, you're just looking for motion. And then that will help you identify the airplane or the aircraft. And then, like we were talking about at night, you want to use your peripherals. So you want to look off center in order to view traffic. Okay, so now we're going to get into clearing. So when do you need to clear? Well, I would say anytime you are making a significant movement. That's how I would phrase that. So anytime you're about to make a large heading change or a large change in pitch, whatever it is, I would clear. So this would be taxiing onto the taxiway, because you're about to make a big turn onto the taxiway. Look through your turn, look right, look left, look in the middle. If you're turning on to a runway, look on the approach end, look on the departure end, look right in front of you, and are you actually cleared onto the runway? Straight and level before you turn, before you start a climb, before you start a descent. And then the big one that we're going to talk about for flight training is before you do a maneuver, right? So we want to do our clearing turns prior to every single maneuver. A clearing turn, I've been told that it's 145-degree heading change. My lesson plans here say that it's two 90-degree turns. I would lean more towards the 90-degree turns. So you're going to do one turn to the left, and then one more turn to the right, and then you're back on your starting heading. Now, an important thing to know, what are you looking at when you're doing these turns? Because you're attempting to clear the area. You want to visually check to see if anyone is around that might be a collision risk. So where are you going to look? Well, with our Cessnas, which is our high wing aircraft, we have blind spots. So we cannot see above us, right, because we have this wing. And then when we're in a turn, we cannot see to the side of us, at least in the direction of the turn. So when we are doing our clearing turns, and we make our first one to the left, if we're turning left, which way should we look? Well, we don't want to look left because there's a giant wing right here. We want to look out to the right because we have a much larger field of view. So whenever we go left, we're looking right, and we're looking all the way up, and then we're looking down and just scanning for traffic, okay? And then the opposite when you go back. So you want to look on the wing side up because of our blind spots. Like I said before, every maneuver you want to do that. And then lastly, it would be before landing. You would want to visually clear the final before you turn on the final, and then the runway before you land. Okay. So that's clearing. Another blind spot that's kind of a pet peeve of mine is dirty windshields. You got to make sure your windshields are clean. You cannot properly scan if you have bugs all over the windshield. It's impossible. Make sure they are clean, but also make sure that you clean it right. Straight up and down. No, none of this. None of this. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Actually, it might honestly just be down. I don't know. Double check before you clean a windshield. And then we also want to talk about the blossom effect. The blossom effect deals with your depth perception with an airplane when it's coming right at you. So it's going to seem very small until it is right up on you. Okay, so if you have bugs on your windshield that are this big, well, that aircraft is going to be pretty small, and a tiny little bug could hide it from your vision coming straight at you, because it doesn't really grow in size until it's like within 100 feet of you. And then at that point, your collision time is like probably less than a second. So making sure your windshield is clear to be able to see aircraft at a distance as well, and get a proper warning time. Some tools to reduce collision risk: sunglasses, using proper lighting, radio calls, knowing your right-of-way rules, non-tower procedures, proper traffic patterns, ADS-B in, and flight following can all be useful to reduce collision risks. Okay, so mid-air collision risk factors. So what are some situations that would lead to a mid-air collision? What are some of the common ones, the most statistically common times to have a collision risk? Well, it's going to be on perfect flying days and on weekends. There's a couple factors for this. If it's perfect weather, people kind of relax a little bit. They're not going to be actively scanning for traffic, because they'll just be like, oh, I'll be able to see them. It's super clear outside. I'll be able to see them no problem. Which is not necessarily true. So people kind of relax on their scanning. But also, and I hate to say it, but a lot of what they call weekend warriors go out there and are going to be flying on perfect days. So less experienced pilots are going to be flying on the good days compared to the bad days. If it's kind of teetering IFR, then you're pretty much going to have only IFR pilots flying who are going to be more experienced compared to Joe Schmo, who got his private 2 weeks ago, who's not going to be as experienced, and may not be paying as good of attention or have as good scanning skills. So the combination of people being relaxed and the inexperience of pilots flying during good weather days can cause a significant collision risk, especially around busy areas, most notably airports and practice areas. I have a little chart here. Distribution of mid-air collisions in the airport traffic pattern. 68% of mid-air collisions are either on final or on the runway, with 32% coming on downwind and short final. So keep that in mind, I suppose. But yeah, congested areas, especially practice areas when people are making very large changes in altitude and heading because of the maneuvers, making sure that you're vigilant and practicing good radio calls when doing maneuvers in practice areas. Okay, couple more things that we're just going to hit on real quick. Visual cues of an impending mid-air collision. So number one, you want to look at the motion of the aircraft. If you see an airplane in the sky, and they're going to be pretty far away, so it's going to kind of just look like a dot. If they are not moving left or right, then you are most likely you definitely are on a collision course for them. If they are right out in front of you and they're not moving left or right, you're on a collision course. So at that point, you'd follow your right-of-way rules if you can even see what kind of airplane they are. If you don't, both pilots veer right. So that's how you would know if you have an impending mid-air collision during the day. At night, you would know based on the aircraft's lights. So the nav lights, I have a picture on here somewhere. I don't know where that's at. The nav lights, you have green on the right side, red on the left side, and then you have your landing light in the front, you have strobes on the back, strobes on the tail, you have a white light on the tail, your beacon up top. So just knowing the position of all the lights, and then you can kind of deduce which way the aircraft is facing based on what lights you see. So if you're flying and you see a green light on the left and a red light on the right, then that means that y'all are headed straight at each other. Compared to if you see a green light on the right and a red light on the left, then you know that they are facing away from you and you have more time to react. You would also see a white light on the back of the tail. So that's how you know if there is an impending mid-air collision during the day and during or at night. Division of attention inside and outside the aircraft. For VFR conditions, you want to be 90% of the time outside, 10% of the time inside. So the majority of your flying should be through visual references and then doing a cross-check real quick through your instruments. So like I said, 90% outside, 10% inside. You should be constantly scanning for traffic, constantly looking for traffic. Especially during cross countries. Don't get lazy and cruise. Okay, last thing I have, which is really just more interesting than anything else, is a breakdown of your reaction times. So, as humans, how much time do we need to react to avoid a collision? Well, it takes us 0.1 seconds to detect an airplane. Dang, that's pretty quick, 0.1. Well, it takes us another 1 second to say to ourselves subconsciously, that's an airplane. So it takes us 1 second to realize that that is actually an airplane. It takes us about 5 seconds to realize we're on a collision course. 5 seconds to realize that, okay, we're about to hit each other. Or we're on a course to hit each other. It takes us 4 seconds to decide to turn left or right. It takes us 0.4 seconds to react and apply inputs, flight control inputs. And then it takes about 2 seconds for the airplane to actually start moving one way or the other. So if you add this up, it takes about 12 and a half seconds total to react. That's typically what they consider to be our reaction time. It's 12 and a half seconds. Well, if we look at this chart here, you can see that trying to avoid the glare. So at 210 miles an hour, which is going to be more realistic to what we're flying in general aviation. At 210 miles an hour, it takes, if both airplanes, if the combined speeds of both the airplanes are 210 miles an hour. So if each airplane is flying 105 miles an hour, it takes them 9 seconds to collide from 0.5 miles away, which is less than the reaction time. So if you only first see each other at half a mile away, you're not going to have enough time to react. Now, obviously it increases drastically when you're traveling 300 miles an hour. If both airplanes have a closing speed of 600, you would collide at 1 mile. 2 miles, it would be pretty close. But it kind of just gives you kind of a reference to see how long it actually takes us to react and how important it is to be scanning. Because if you can identify someone 3 miles out, you have a whole minute before you collide, compared to 9 seconds. That's all I got for y'all today. Appreciate y'all listening. I'll see you next time.